Good morning, all friends. We are beginning our program. This is Supriya Bhalerao, Joint Secretary, AIWC in New Delhi. Welcoming you all at this webinar. For a change, it's a morning session this time for us. This webinar is on Women in Satyagraha, a continuing legacy, which is the third of the second series of 3 webinars jointly held with National Foundation of Communal Harmony, an autonomous body of Ministry of Home Affairs. Let me remind you all that the first webinar series was conducted in collaboration with NFCH in the year 2020 to study the effect of COVID pandemic on the lives of people of India. There were 10 sessions held in 10 zones. Today, I'm playing Mrs. Bulbul Das's role of moderator as she is unwell and unable to join. We have with us today Mr. Manoj Pant, Secretary of NFCH, and our guest speakers, Professor Sachidanand Mohanty, former Vice Chancellor of Central University of Odisha, and Dr. Varsha Das, former Director of National Gandhi Museum. I welcome you, Mr. Pant, Professor Mohanty, and Dr. Das. Without wasting any time, I would like to invite our President, Mrs. Sheila Kakde, to give her presidential address to the audience. Over to you, Sheila ji.
Thank you, Supriya ji. Namaskar. On behalf of All India Women's Conference, I extend hearty welcome to one and all who have joined in today's webinar to celebrate Communal Harmony Week, which is every year celebrated from 19th November by National Foundation for Communal Harmony, NFCH. Today we have eminent speakers, Professor Sachidanand Mohanty, Dr. Varsha Das, to enlighten us on the topic of Women in Satyagraha, a continuing legacy. I welcome Professor Mohanty and Dr. Das and also Shri Manoj Panji, Secretary NFCH, and other dignitaries of NFCH also. I welcome our patrons, Mrs. Jain and Mrs. Kohli, to this webinar. When we are thinking of women in Satyagraha, I'm sure you all must have reminded of rich legacy of AIWC and how our past presidents were inspired by non-violence and non-cooperative movement of Gandhiji, and they joined in the movement. Our past presidents like Rameshwari Nehru, Vijayalakshmi Pandit, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, Hansa Mehta, Margaret Cousins, all of them have worked wholeheartedly for our independence in every direction given by Gandhiji. We have been listening to these stories in our series of webinars on our past presidents since last September 2020. So today we will begin, we will have more enlightenment on the women in Satyagraha from our eminent speakers, and I welcome them again once more, and let us proceed with our further program.
Thank you, Sheila ji, for that overview. Now I would invite Mr. Manoj Pant, the Secretary of NFCH, to tell us about their organization. Before that, I would like to introduce him briefly. Mr. Manoj Pant, Masters in Physics from IIT Roorkee, is a retired Indian Forest Service officer of 1986 batch. He served in the state of Jammu and Kashmir Forest Department and thereafter in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, first as a director and then as a joint secretary. He also served as a chief vigilance officer in Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited, a Maharatna public sector undertaking of Government of India, and thereafter as Director Youth Services and Sports. Then the Secretary State Sports Council of the Jammu and Kashmir State. He continued to work after his retirement in 2018 as Principal Chief Conservator of Forest of Jammu and Kashmir State, and later joined National Foundation of Communal Harmony, NFCH, an autonomous organization under Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, and as Secretary. So, Mr. Manoj Pant, please tell us about your organization. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Supriya ji. आप सबको बहुत बहुत नमस्कार. A very good morning to Sheila ji, Manju ji, Supriya ji, and all the wonderful ladies of All India Women's Conference. And felicitations to the distinguished speakers of today's webinar. But before I start, I would like to compliment the All India Women's Conference for organizing such excellent webinars across the country. Even during the pandemic times, they organized about 10 webinars on very, very relevant issues, which were not only attended by a large number of participants, but were also appreciated across the board. So my compliments to All India Women's Conference, and I hope they continue to do the good work. And we have been collaborating with All India Women's Conference for last 7-8 years now. And with the situation improving, we hope to come out of the webinar mode and try to do some physical programs as well, which we have already planned. And in fact, we have planned 2 women's festivals also. So we are quite excited about them, and we are quite looking forward to those women's festival and the other seminars that the All India Women Conference proposes to organize in collaboration with the National Foundation for Communal Harmony. Now, our organization is about 30 years old. It is an autonomous organization under Ministry of Home Affairs. And the primary objective of the organization is to support those children who have lost their parents due to militancy-related incidents and communal violence, Naxal violence, ethnic violence. And there are about 14,000 such children across the country who we have supported so far in 24 states and 164 districts. And I'm very happy to share with you that some of these children who were associated with us are now respectable members of the society. Some of them are doctors, engineers, MBAs. They are working in private sector. They are working in government sector. So it's a very nice feeling to help reach out to these children who were victims of circumstances and who have seen the unfortunate incidents before their own eyes, and to help them settle themselves in the society once again. And apart from that, we also collaborate with various partners, be it the state government, central government, and public sector undertakings, and NGOs and organizations like All India Women Conference, to spread the message of unity and harmony across the country. And we firmly believe that maintaining unity and harmony in the country is not the job of an individual or one organization. I think everyone has to contribute towards that. Every single individual and every organization has to contribute towards promoting peace and harmony in the country. And in that respect, we organize various seminars, webinars, youth festivals, then women's festival, then talks, and all that in collaboration with various universities, educational institutions. We firmly believe that to maintain the peace and harmony in the country, there are 2 major stakeholders in the society. One is, of course, the women, and other is the young generation, the youth and the children. So all our programs are focused towards sensitizing the youth of the country, the students of the country, and taking advice and supporting the women who are actually a great contributor in promoting peace and harmony in the country. And for that purpose, we have a program, special program by the name Communal Harmony Campaign Week, which is observed by the foundation across the country from 19th to 25th of November every year. And what we do during the week is that we send publicity materials and stickers to about 120,000 partners across the country, and we encourage educational institutions and NGOs and offices to, have some kind of function, some kind of talk, some kind of peace march to sensitize people about the importance of peace and harmony in the country. And we also take this opportunity to request all our partners, all 120,000 partners, to collect donations for us, because we don't get any financial support from the government. Supporting the children, organizing program, etc., is all done by the corpus fund of the organization. And we use this opportunity to request our partners to sensitize people to come forward and donate for the cause. of promoting peace and harmony in the country. And I'm very happy to share with you that 120,000 partners that we have across the country. And the response over the years has been tremendous. We are very grateful to all our partners. And we have also sent our publicity materials to 150 odd branches of All India Women's Conference this year. And I'm very, very sure that the branches of All India Women's Conference will not only organize functions at the grassroots level, but will also mobilize resources for the foundation. It is not the money that matters. Even if it's purely voluntary, it is not the money that matters. Even if you give 1 rupee, the feeling that you are helping a child stand on his or her feet and find a place for himself or herself in the society is the feeling that matters the most. It is not the money. No money can compare to the feeling of supporting a child who has lost his parents in the violence and who comes from the lowest strata of the society, who comes from the remotest corner of the society, to identify those children, to reach out to those children, to give a helping hand to those children, to help them create a space for themselves in the society, to help them come out of the dark period which they have faced. I think the feeling is really, really wonderful. And I'm very grateful to All India Women Conference for being an active partner with us on this. Supriyaji, nice to see you after a long time, and hope to continue the good work. I hope you continue to do the good work.
Yes, we will.
I'm also grateful to Manjuji for choosing this topic. This, I think, women in Satyagraha and continuing legacy. I think my personal opinion is that the historians and the stalwarts have not been giving due attention to the role of women during the freedom struggle, during the Satyagraha movement, during the independence era and post-independence era. Somehow, we have not been fair to the role of women in the progress of the country, in the development of the country, in maintaining peace and harmony in the country. I think it's a wonderful topic, and it's a wonderful opportunity for us to know about the great contribution of women during the Satyagraha, because what we are is only because of the women in the society. Without women, we are zero. I mean, I can say that in an open forum. And I'm quite looking forward to listening to the views of Professor Sachidanand Mohanty, a very learned person and former Vice Chancellor of Central University of Odisha. And I'm also very eager to hear the views of Dr. Varsha Das. So congratulations once again, All India Women's Conference. Congratulations to Sheila ji, Manju ji, Supriya ji, and all the wonderful ladies. And I hope that the good work that you are doing will continue to do forever, because maintaining peace and harmony is not a one-day job. It's a work in progress all the time. So we are very happy to be associated with AIWC, and we hope that we have great many programs lined up for future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pant. And I would like to share with you that the program which we had decided in Hyderabad with a college, they have received your publicity material and all the detailed program, and they are celebrating 1 week of national integration and communal harmony since 19th of December. One of their lecturers, senior lecturer who's in charge of that program is with us. She's Aparna. Dr. Aparna, you can show up, start your video and meet them. They have identified around 30 students of this engineering college, all women students, and they are going to coordinate on this for the entire year, and we will be working with them jointly. And recently we have decided on this, and formally we'll come back to you with some kind of a communication. So your word is spreading, and we are doing the work, as well as.
Yeah, may I just take 1 more minute?
Yeah, sure.
This Hyderabad ma'am, Supriya ma'am, and Sheila ma'am, and Manju ma'am, we see for 2 years we were completely confined to the rooms because of COVID. Now this Hyderabad program, or another one that we are planning, we are quite looking forward to. I'm very excited about it. And as you said that the ma'am from Hyderabad is also joining us. So ma'am,
Yes.
I would like to assure you that, see, we have to do something good, something big
Yes.
to get the people out of the corona syndrome. Hopefully, the country is out of corona now, and we
Yes.
need to get back to our tracks. We need to spread the message of peace and harmony in a full way. And I'm quite eager to get a proposal from you. In fact, if we can discuss it across the table or
Yeah,
this, we
sure.
are all with you, and I'm quite excited about it. And I'm
Yeah.
sure she'll do a wonderful job. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, we are also very excited about it, and we'll show you some results. We are very happy about it.
Yeah, here I would
yeah.
like to say one thing, Supriya.
Uh-huh.
Our Noida branch, Dr. Upasana Singh, just 2 days ago, she had Nukkad Natak on this in the street on the streets only, and you must have seen the pictures regarding the communal harmony week.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. So the things are happening, and AIWC is taking it forward, not for NFCH, but for ourselves, because we want to spread the word, and wherever it is clicking, we will be working with educational institutes. Thank you, Mr. Pant, on that. Now, I would invite Manju ji to tell us about the purpose of this webinar. Mrs. Manju Kak, Dr. Manju Kak is our member in charge for national integration and communal harmony, and has done a lot of work in this area, including developing a partnership with AIWC with NFCH. She's been our past treasurer at the national level, and now she is the vice president of International Alliance of Women. I request you, Manjuji, to say a few words. You're muted.
Thank you, Supriya. But the most important part of my life is really my writing and my work in the field of art. And this voluntary work that I have been doing with the IWC, our past patrons and presidents are here for the last 23 years, is something that we are all committed to do, as Mr. Pant has said. But I have known Professor Sachidanand Mohanty and Dr. Varsha Das for many, many years. And they have patiently, as academics and intellectuals, listened to us and listened to our activist and our grassroots experiences with great patience, which I'm hoping they will take back to their lecture rooms. Sachidanand Mohanty and I go back to our joint appearance in a volume of Katha, of short stories. You remember? 1990s. And Varsha has been my mentor and Buddhist leader because I'm a practicing Buddhist. But having said that, I would like to really thank Manoj Pantji and Sheila ji for giving me the space and allowing me to do this work, and our three patrons who have encouraged us. Inke bina ye kaam nahi hota. So, though this is our 13th webinar, 3 on the national level, it is all these people and branches that have allowed us to execute this. But having said all this, ek cheez mujhe zarur kehni hai. We are all nationalists at heart. We are all patriots at heart. हम सब चाहते हैं कि हमारी देश की उन्नति हो और हमारा रास्ता एकदम तीर की तरह ऐसे जाए कि हम निशाने पे पहुंचे. निशाना क्या है? निशाना ये है कि हर एक भूखा बच्चा who is uneducated, जिसको हमारे जैसे privileges नहीं मिले हैं, उसके घर तक, उसके द्वार तक ये privilege एक गरीब बच्चा अपना हक समझ के पाले. That is what we have to do, and that is our mission. Not just as AIWC volunteers, but as mothers, as daughters, as mothers-in-law, and as citizens of India. Zamana badalta hai, log badalते हैं, political parties बदलती हैं, लक्ष्य कभी नहीं बदलता है. The Lakshya of All India Women's Conference has always remained the same. Benefit to all. So despite the fact that we've held full-time jobs, some of us are professors, doctors, lawyers, etc., we find time to do this little work, and our 3 office bearers give full-time effort to do this, to keep this organization floating. Having said that, thank you for your patience, Professor Sachidanand Mohanty, for listening to all of us women, and of course, Varsha, who is one of us. Thank you, Supriya. Over to you.
Thank you, Manjuji, for your words. Now we come actually for the program that is awaited to hear Professor Sachidanand Mohanty and Dr. Varsha Das. Dr. Sachidananda Mohanty is a former professor and head of the Department of English, University of Hyderabad. So he is our own Hyderabadi gentleman. And nice feeling it gives me, Professor Mohanty. He's a winner of many national and international awards, such as the Katha, British Council, Fulbright, Charles Wallace, the Salzburg, and he has published extensively in the field of British American gender, translation, and post-colonial studies. His work has appeared in Oxford, Sage, Routledge, and Orient Longman, among other notable publishing houses. His pioneering archival work in the context of Odisha include Early Women's Writing in Odisha, A Lost Tradition, New Delhi, Sage Publications, 2005, Gender and Cultural Identity in Colonial Odisha, Hyderabad, Orient Longman, 2008, and The Lost World of Sarala Devi, New Delhi, Oxford University Press, 2016. His work was recognized on the occasion of 75th anniversary of the US and India Educational Foundation, which is India Fulbright Commission. He was the former Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Odisha. Thank you for being with us, Professor Mohanty, and over to you. Please address our gathering.
Good morning. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much for the words, for the articulated expressions, preparatory words and articulated expressions which precede my presentation. I'm very happy to offer this meditation on the role of women in the Satyagraha movement in Odisha. I'm grateful to the All India Women's Conference, as well as the National Foundation for Communal Harmony, which is so ably headed now by Sri Manoj Pantji, a distinguished member, a former distinguished member of the Indian Forest Service. I'm equally grateful to Srimati Bulbul Das, Srimati Manju Kak, and Srimati Supriya Bhalerao-ji, as well as the key architect of the All India Women's Conference, Sheila ji. Thank you for permitting me to offer this meditation, a secular meditation, on the role of women in the Satyagraha movement in Odisha. My aim in this essay would be the following: the retrieval of women's role in the Satyagraha movement in modern Odisha, a key endeavor in feminist historiography. Secondly, tracing the intersection of female creativity and Gandhian thought. And finally, underlining the relevance of this lost narrative to our own times and milieu. Why has this narrative disappeared from our view, despite the rise in digital literacy, growing interest in our past in the post-colonial context, and a greater awareness of women's issues mandated by society and polity? What could explain this lapse in national memory that goes beyond generational shifts in sensibility and institutional amnesia? I'm indeed puzzled about this phenomenon, since I am a cultural historian and I have been looking at the marginalized narratives at the national and international level. Mahatma Gandhi made several trips during the freedom struggle to Odisha. Women were at the forefront in his Padayatra. They often led the processions and defied the police and other authorities. Many from conservative middle-class families who seldom stepped out from their homes participated widely in the public domain and braved grave ordeals while fighting against the Raj. Women's presence in the movement in Odisha was not sporadic, transient, or happenstance. Many of the outstanding Odia women freedom fighters were self-educated. They and their spouses sacrificed their worldly ambition and followed the path of Gandhiji selflessly. Some of them had regular correspondence with the Mahatma. They went from door to door, collecting money and jewelry for the Swaraj Fund, under the guidance of the father of the nation. The participation of Odia women was not confined to any particular region. It encompassed the length and breadth of the entire province. And yet, paradoxically, their contribution and this narrative has been completely marginalized at the national level. It is also greatly marginalized in the context of modern Odisha. Agenda for National Reconstruction. Odia women understood that freedom struggle did not mean just the dethronement of the colonial rule. They realized that political independence had little meaning without vital social reforms like prohibition, widow remarriage, and economic emancipation. They therefore took to charkha and khadi wholeheartedly, campaigned vigorously for adult literacy programs in the urban and rural areas, fought for the rights of the Harijans, now called Dalits, picketed before liquor shops, and advocated active participation of widows in the social reform movements and political campaigns. They were not passive followers. Some of them, like Sarlabala Das, after whom a college has been named in Cuttack called Sarlabala Women's College, questioned Gandhiji's denunciation of machine-made cloth when he himself, she pointed out, quote, was using motor cars, medicine, and watches, etc. Others, like Sarala Devi, used their own judgment in the participation of electoral politics in the province and defied Gandhiji. Gandhiji had asked her not to participate in the election and to take part in the electoral politics, but she had her own kind of a judgment and she defied Gandhiji and took part and was elected as a member of the assembly, and she played a very important and pivotal role as a member of the Legislative Assembly. In brief, they utilized their agency, attended public meetings. Some, like Sarala Devi, traveled along with their spouses to Congress sessions at Nagpur and elsewhere, and brought back the message of Gandhiji to the remote heartlands of Odisha. Such women are not passive followers. Their thought and action were based on the touchstone of their own conscience, even as they admired the charisma of the Mahatma and wholeheartedly accepted his leadership. It is hard to list the members of the Odia women who took part in the Satyagraha movement in Odisha. They run into thousands, hundreds, and if not thousands. Rama Devi, Sarala Devi, Kuntala Kumari Sabat, Kukila Devi, Nirmala Devi, Jahnavi Devi, Ketramani Devi, Subhadra Mahatap, Purubai, Kiran Bala Sengupta, Sashibala Kanungo, Kiran Lekha Mohanty, Mangala Sengupta, Ratnamali Jema, Bimala Datta, Hemalata Samanta, Abarti Lakshmi Bai, Sita Devi Khadanga, Rasamani Devi, Chitrabhanu Devi, Saraswati Devi, Nishamani Devi, Prabhabati Devi, Parvati Giri, Annapurna Maharana, and numerous others played an active part. They came from various walks of life, from the undivided districts of Puri, Baleswar, Cuttack, Ganjam, Koraput, and Sambalpur. Women from the royal and zamindari background joined hands with total commoners for the cause of the nation. And yet, how many of us remember their names and their own glorious legacy? For a number of Odia women, literature became a vital instrument for anti-colonial nationalism. Kuntala Kumari, Sarala Devi, Rama Devi, Malati Chaudhary, and Annapurna Maharana wrote letters within and outside the prisons. Some of them, like Kuntala Kumari and Sarala Devi, wrote essays, poetry, drama, short stories, novels, literary criticism that were markedly influenced by Gandhian thought and vision. It would be of interest to Sheilaji and to the All India Women's Conference that Kuntala Kumari, while she, during her sojourn in Delhi, had addressed the All India Women's Conference. The literary feminism of Sarala Devi went beyond Gandhiji's adage and advice and was informed by winds of change regarding women that came from faraway England, Europe, and America. Sarala's essay, Narira Dabi, The Rights of Women, advocated the participation of women in the public domain and the woman's control over her biological and reproductive self. It spoke against the notion of marital rape, yet to be enshrined in the Indian legislation. It is worth noting that for women freedom fighters in Odisha, social reform movements, and movements for workers' rights, indigenous industry, interfaith dialogue, removal of caste orthodoxies, religious bigotry, and sectarianism went hand in hand with the Satyagraha movement, whose cornerstone, as Gandhiji taught, were adherence to truth and non-violence. I shall underline the work of Kuntala Kumari, Sarala Devi, Rama Devi, Annapurna Maharana, and Malati Chaudhary as representative figures in the movement. Kuntala Kumari, 1901 to 1938, who lived and preached syncretic living beyond caste and religious divides, was born to Christian parents. Daniel and Monica Sabath. She spent her early years in Burma, became a Brahmo for her love for a married man, Kailash Rao, a medical demonstrator who became her mentor. Thwarted in her desire for a lasting union, she got married to Krishna Prasad Brahmachari, spent the last part of her life in Delhi as a writer and a physician. She had an unhappy marriage and a tragic end in 1938 at the age of 37. She was a publisher and active member of the All India Women's Conference. Kuntala Kumari addressed Odia workers at Calcutta and wrote patriotic poetry advocating economic equality and self-rule. Through her writings, she brought self-respect to the Odia people, reminded them of their glorious past and heritage, and urged them to throw off the foreign yoke. And it is worth noticing that she did not believe in xenophobia. She did not believe in linguistic and ethnic chauvinism. She believed in the self-esteem of the Odia people, but she constantly urged them to have ties across the border with neighboring states like Bengal, and also to have alliances with people at the All India level. She participated in the historic Women's Conference at Balesur in 1934, along with other notable women like Rama Devi, Sarada Devi, Jannavi Devi, Kokila Devi, and Purubai. And Purubai had accompanied Gandhiji to Odisha and astonishingly stayed back for the Gandhian mission on the province. Kuntala had many literary works to her credit. They include Bhranti, Nautundi, Kalibohu, Parashamani, and deeply moving lyrics like Shepali Prati and Tara Prati. It is worth noticing that the literary feminism of Kuntala Kumari was greatly influenced by Gandhiji's thought and vision and the Satyagraha movement. A poem that she wrote originally in English, it's incredible that she wrote in English too, testifies to her spirit of indignation against the foreign rule and hope for emancipation. I'll just read the 4 lines because of the paucity of time, but that will give you a kind of a flavor in our own English poetry as well. O land of famine, fury and flood, the home of pain and misery, in all her veins flows a warm thy blood, we sigh and shed our tears for thee. And this is something exactly which is found in the lyrics, in Oriya lyrics of Kuntala Kumari, in Tara Prati and Shepali Prati, which has become iconic poems of the state of Orissa. Satyagraha and social activism. Satyagraha and social activism. Kuntala's achievement in the freedom struggle were well matched by Rama Devi, 1899-1985. Daughter of Gopal Ballabh Das, younger brother of Madhusudan Das, the architect of modern Orissa. Rama Devi received no formal schooling. She was married to Gopabandhu Chaudhary, a nationalistic family, and the couple plunged into the freedom struggle. Gopabandhu gave up the government job that she had. Recognized as one of the most acclaimed freedom fighters of Odisha, she and her husband joined the Sarvodaya movement. In 1930, she took part in the Salt Satyagraha movement at Inchuri and Kujanga and was imprisoned in 1932. Later in life, she was conferred the award Jamuna Lal Bajaj Award for Outstanding Social Work in 1981. And as I said, a leading women's college has been named after her in Bhubaneswar. It was called Ramadevi Women's College. Now it is called Ramadevi Women's University. On 23rd March 1921, Ramadevi participated in a political meeting of 40 Odia women inside the Binod Bihari temple at Cuttack. Later accompanied by Malati Chaudhary, Annapurna Devi and Kiran Bala Sen, she took part in the Salt Satyagraha movement at Inchuri, Balesur. During the Quit India movement, she was imprisoned for 2 years in the Cuttack jail and was released in July 1944. The point I'm trying to make here is that all of us know about Gandhiji's Salt March in Dandi. But I think the salt marches which were organized in different, districts of our own provinces are worth noticing as well. So Inchudi in Balesur, for example, was a very, very important and a sacred spot where I think there was a defiance of the British authorities for the harvesting of salt. Similar efforts were also made in a district called Kujanga, which bordered the sea. I think both Kujang as well as Inchudi have become important sites of pilgrimage for those who believe in the Sarvodaya movement, in the contribution of the Sarvodaya movement. Unlike the others in the sisterhood, Malati Chaudhary, 1904-1998, was born in a distinguished Bengali family. Look at the instance of cross-border activism which is going on. Alliances between the Oriya women and men with the Bengali counterparts, largely because of the Brahma movement. And this is something which has really disappeared. We were talking about communal harmony, we're talking about ethnic harmony. I think here are extraordinary examples that we find alliances between like-minded members, men and women who cross the boundaries. And during the time when we did not have any internet, we did not have digital medium, and yet there was a kind of significant cross-border activities for a common cause, that was the Sarvodaya movement. And she was married to Navakrishna Chaudhary, Gandhian Navakrishna Chaudhary, in 1927, and the couple dedicated themselves to the national freedom and social reform movements. In 1934, Malati joined Gandhiji in his Padayatra in Odisha, and she took part in the salt satyagraha at Hinchuri and Kujanga in 1930 and was arrested on 20th September 1930 and jailed for 6 months. She took part in the Quit India movement in 1942, was jailed till 1945. After independence, she fought for the rights of the Adivasis and campaigned for prohibition and the elimination of leprosy. And currently, the 75th anniversary of the Bajirao Chhatrabasa, an ashram for the destitute children, is being observed in Orissa. 75th anniversary of the Bajirao Chhatrabasa, which was set up by Navakrishna Chaudhary and Malati Chaudhary. She wrote many playlets based on socially meaningful themes and staged them at Bajirao Ashram at Anugul in Odisha. She was popularly known as Numa in Odisha. And Navakrishna Chaudhary was known as Bapi, and she was known as Numa. And I would like to extend an invitation to the members of the All India Women's Conference to visit this ashram, Gandhian ashram, in the Anugul district of Odisha. Literature and feminism, Sarala Devi. The first Oriya woman to court imprisonment was Sarala Devi, 1901 to 1986. A versatile and multi-talented personality, Sarala was born on 19th August 1904 at Jagatsinghpur in the undivided Cuttack district to Basudev Kanungo and Padmavati Devi. Now, the chronicle that I'm going to really offer soon will make it very, it will be absolutely incredible to know the kind of association that Sarala had in the Vellore jail in 1934. Sarala educated herself. She had studied up to class 7, and yet you will see very soon the kind of letters that she wrote from the jail in original English when she had studied up to class 7 to her husband, Bhagirathi Mahapatra. And she addresses her husband, my mother, who was a very gifted poet of the state, Vidut Prabha Devi. I remember she addressed my father as Su. She said, Su. And she did not address my father by her name. But Sarala Devi, who preceded my mother, and she addresses her husband as Dear Bhagu Babu. She did not say Dear so-and-so, Dear Bhagu Babu. And she writes this. Look at the kind of a self-respect that she had. And she had not given up the family also. The first wave of feminists gave up the family, and the second wave with Simone de Beauvoir also respected the family. So you do not need to really give up and abandon the children, because from the jail, Vellore jail, when she was a prison mate of Durgabai Deshmukh and Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, they were not Deshmukh and Chattopadhyay at that time, and she is writing a letter and she says that I'm doing khadi here, but what about Tikkun? What about Tikkun, our child in Alak Ashram? Are you taking good care of him or not? Because children should not be left to their own fate. So here is, incredible Sarala Devi, who is not giving up the family. And she says family is very important. And she is talking about marital rape. At one context, she didn't want to have with a child. She says that, I know this is not a child of my own, wish. And it is not something which has been created by my own consent. But later on, of course, she was dissuaded, and a child was born called Amitabh Mahapatra. But I think, 1934, she's talking about the notion of the marital rape, and she's influenced by the Gandhian vision, and how few of us know about this. So I think marginalization has been complete, absolutely. And it is incredible and shocking also, because today we have a digital literacy, and we can really look back and recapture the past. And I think why it is important to really recover that I will sum up in the final paragraph of my presentation. So I'm skipping many portions because of a lack of time, I think it deserves an entire seminar. Each of the thinkers that I talked about in the activists, they were not thinkers and activists in a separate manner. They did not divide their own self into activism and theory. They were both theorists as well as practitioners. Rama Devi wrote Jivanapati, and she was also a great activist. She set up the ashram. Sarla Devi, as I have told you, was a great literary feminist, and she was also an activist. She was a member of the Legislative Assembly. Kuntala Kumari was an activist. She was a gynecologist, and she talked so vehemently about the need for hygiene of women at the time of childbirth. And then, of course, Annapurna Maharana was a member of the Banarasena, and she has written a kind of a memoir. So you can see that literature and activism are not separate compartments. They go hand in hand. So it's a multifaceted and a complex kind of a narrative that one finds in Odisha. From the presidency jail, now I'll just read out a portion of the letters, because you can have a whole seminar, Manoj ji and others, Sheila ji, you can have a whole seminar around a letter.
Hello.
Because the epistolary movement.
Hi.
Yes.
Good. I just want to know.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please. There's
Yes.
some disturbance.
So is it, am I audible now? Am I
Yeah,
audible?
yeah, you are, sir.
So I just quote an extract from the letter that she wrote, addressing her husband as Dear Bagu Babu. What about your own share of the responsibility in Alaka Ashram, which was visited by Gandhiji? I hope you have not forgotten. I had so-and-so, and, I had so-and-so had lent, I had given 100 rupees to somebody, as a kind of a loan. What about that loan? Have you got it back or not? So she's writing, you may perhaps be under the notion that I'm idling much of my time. I'm busy with the study of English. The others also are busy, like me, with the study of Hindi and English. Self-literacy and self-education. You don't need to go to higher education. You don't need to go to our colleges for the learning. And regular classes in both English and Hindi are being conducted. Abhishek, why is it resounding? Regular classes in both English and Hindi are being conducted, the former by my friend Mrs. Lakshmipati B.A. and the latter by my dearest friend Durgabai, who is very clever, pretty, and an active young Andhra lady who was the dictator of the Satyagraha campaign in Madras. Now, I was in Hyderabad, Supriyaji, for so many years, and I made some inquiries because at the entrance to the Osmania University is called Andhra Mahila Sabha. And I was
Yes.
told it was set up by Durgabai Deshmukh.
Yes,
And I
yes.
made some inquiries because Durgabai, Sarala Devi had a close association with Durgabai Deshmukh. And I asked them, do you have some kind of a documents, a narrative about Sarala Devi? They said, no. So yet you can see that, I mean, it's like nearer to temple, farther from God. And the time when they had such close affinities, and I think it is a great sign of poverty and cultural poverty and intellectual poverty and feminist poverty also, that, those documents are not there in Andhra Mahila Sabha. I think they should be restored in Andhra Mahila Sabha. And the members and the activists who go there, because in Odisha, we have not really created an institution after Sarala Devi. A college has been named. So you can see that, political posturing is one thing, but actually contribution and acknowledgement at the social and literary and institutional level, that's a different thing. By the way, it's no aspersion on the present dispensation in Odisha or elsewhere. But I'm saying that this amnesia has to be really removed. And who can do it if not the intellectual community, if not the academic community, if it is not the distinguished audience that comprises today? Then I am so deeply honored to be addressing this kind of a thing. Because, it has to really stem. It is not just a kind of a seminar activity. It has to be created at the psychic level itself. And then, therefore, as Manojji said, the outreach can take place, because no great creativity can take place if it is just surface and intellectual. It has to really spring from the fountainhead of our own deepest self. And I'm suggesting that the women that I am talking about and commemorating, they really believed in it, heart and soul. And it was not just a kind of a surface activity for them. If someone to document the process of and this is another thing, the influence of Gandhiji in my life. And and if you see the number of essays that she has written, and I can just reel off all the names also. Because when I was doing this work on the lost world of Sarala Devi, and if you say in Odisha, Sarala Devi, though, and most people say, oh, you mean Sarala Das. I think it's important to know Sarala Devi is not Sarala Das. Sarala Das is a very revered poet of Adikavi Sarala Das. But Sarala Devi has an important place in herself also. If you see the number of essays that she wrote, the titles, most of the titles are named after Gandhiji. It's incredible, the kind of an influence. And yet it was not just one of passive or survival acceptance, because she engaged critically with Gandhiji. And she appropriated certain ideas which she thought were really worth implementing. And she did not accept certain of the ideas, just as Shalbara Das also did the same thing in her own case. Now, I'll just read out just a few lines from this, the influence of Gandhiji in my life, just the opening remarks, because I must not overshoot the time which has been given to me. And I must indeed keep aside certain time for question answers, if there are some questions from this distinguished audience. She says, if someone were to document the process of awakening of women during the period from 1921 to 1947, he would give Mahatma Gandhi the credit for whatever progress women made in the field of education and economic development. At the root of whatever these women do, and you can see that, at the root of whatever women do, lay Gandhiji's thought, ideas, and work. For this reason, he would always be revered as the great mentor of the women of India. I cannot think of any other leader in the world whose views of women are as liberal and varied as expressed in Gandhiji's writings. The solution to women's problems he has suggested apply not only to women in India, but to the counterparts all over the world. So it is not just a hyperbole, because she was quoting Justice McCart about marital rape. She was in close touch with another Shankar Rai, who was both a bilingual writer, very well known in Odisha as well as in Bengal. So another Shankar Rai, who was member of the 9 writers who produced, the novel called Basanti. It's an incredible instance of joint effort of 9 writers. And there are 3 writers, 3 women writers, Sarala Devi and Pratibha Devi, and and her sister, her worthy sister. The 3 of them wrote women-centric novels, chapters in this novel, Basanti. And so she knew what she was talking about. She was influenced by Justice McCart. So when she says that Mahatma Gandhi's words influenced not just the Indian women, but also the woman at the international level. So it was not an act of exaggeration, but she knew what she really had in mind. Now, Annapurna Maharana, I am coming to the close of my own presentation here. The younger member of the community were not left behind, and she lived up to 1912. And yet, for example, and she was not really discussed and talked about at the national level. Not left behind, Rama Devi and Gopavandhu Chaudhary's spirited daughter, Annapurna Maharana, 1917 and 2012, was a member of what was known as Banarasena, a group of young adolescents hilariously called an army of monkeys, who actively assisted the freedom fighters from 1929 onward. She accompanied Gandhiji on his Harijan Padayatra in 1934. Unsuspected by the police, they carried letters and messages. Annapurna participated in the Salt Satyagraha movement at Inchudi, Balasore, and was arrested in 1934. Her portrayal of the travels and turbulations of the women activists during the Satyagraha movement in Odisha makes poignant reading. She took part in the Quit India movement in 1942 and was jailed in 1945. One thing which is very common to all these women we are talking about, of course, in the case of Kuntala Kumari, her life was cut short tragically at the age of 37. But others, Sarala Devi lived right up to the age of 86. And of course, she was completely ignored and forgotten. And she has given the reason as to, and this is not the forum to talk about the reasons. But in the case of Sarala Devi, in the case of Rama Devi, who lived up to 1986. So Sarala Devi lives up to 1986, and Rama Devi lives up to 1980s, and Annapurna Maharana lives up to 2012. And don't you think that it is actually a national shame that they are not talked about? Their own kind of works and essays are not really part of the syllabus. And the universities, for example, when the national freedom struggle is talked about, because we keep talking about to think globally and act locally. And how little of the local action and activism do you really find? the place where the changes ought to take place, distinguished members of this audience, is in the classroom. So I think in America, when Norton Anthology for Women, and of course the minorities is taking place, why is that we have not included the works, just as we have included the Durgabai Deshmukh and Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay? It is very well known for the Khadi movement. And why is that, for example, we have not included Sarla Devi, who was a prison mate? I think, you will notice certain degree of angst in me. Because, you cannot just in a very objective and a detached manner talk about this. Because it is a very humbling experience. Because our entire life has been so self-centered. And I'm not saying that only women have done it, men have also done it. But women have been completely marginalized. And how much of heroism is really required, for example, to step out of this kind of zamindari background and to say that I do not really seek the permission of my husband. My husband is going to really join me in my own kind of a mission. And if we're going to have a child, it will also involve my consent. It will not be decided only by my husband or by mother-in-law. So I think we're not talking about 1990s. We're not talking about 2021. I'm talking about 1930. And I think when we are talking about indigenous feminism, and much is talked about indigenous feminism, but I think it is very important to talk about indigenous feminism also. And I'm suggesting that when you talk about indigenous feminism, you need to talk about Sarla Devi, Rama Devi, Malati Chaudhary, and Kuntala Kumari, Annapurna Maharana. Because at least in the context of Orissa, but Pandita Ramabai and Jyotiba Phule, and you can talk about Maharashtra, and you can talk about Lalitambika Antharjanam in the context of Kerala, for example, and you can talk about Ashapurna Devi and Mahashruti Devi in the context of Bengal, for example. So I think there is a necessity and indispensability of creating a kind of a narrative all India level, of which, for example, the regional narratives will definitely form an important part. And I'm advocating the inclusion of this kind of regional imaginary and regional narrative, which is not just a political participation, but it is also a feminist participation. It is also a participation for the reconstruction of society, because Sarla Devi was talking about the interest of the workers, and she was interested in the trade union movement also. So it is not this and that, this versus that. It is this and that. So it is a syncretic and comprehensive kind of an approach that they have. Now, I will just, Inchudi, for example, we talked about the salt satyagraha in Inchudi, close to the sea in Balasore. And I think, if you look at the autobiography of Annapurna, you find an incredible account of, for example, how the police battery is being used mercilessly against these satyagrahis. And batches of these women and men are going, and like it happened in the case of Dandi March, similar things are happening in Kujanga. And same things are happening in Inchudi also. So I think Inchudi should become a kind of an important, destination, a kind of a patriotic pilgrimage. And so also Kujanga, for example. And she has left a kind of an account which is both vivid as well as poignant. And I'm skipping those because there isn't enough time. And I will come to the question and answer finally. So the lasting legacy. I come to the very end of this kind of a presentation. And I do hope that, it has generated not just, noise, but also light and understanding and awareness. And so much of the contribution of the women is also involves a kind of a, consciousness in terms of gender and awareness and culture. It would thus be seen that the Satyagraha movement in Odisha, directly inspired by Gandhiji, led to consciousness raising among large sections of the people. Puri, Balasore, Cuttack, Sambalpur. Today, there is a division among the Telugus and Oriyas in the border district. Today, there is a difference between Bengalis and Oriyas, and between Chhattisgarh people and Orissa and Bihar and others, for example. But if you look at the participation of the Oriya women, for example, they were Bengalis. Kiranbala Sen. There was Malati Chaudhary. She was Malati Sen. And she was the daughter of a professor who goes to Shantiniketan. And she dares marry an Oriya, Navakrishnan Chaudhary. And there are the Telugus also who come from the border district of, undivided Andhra Pradesh and Orissa. Some of them go to Madras Principality, but some others also take part in the Sarvodaya movement. So where is this kind of a linguistic and ethnic rivalry which is taking place there? There's no ethnic rivalry, there's no linguistic rivalry. There is a participation for a common cause, and that common cause involved the dethronement of the colonial rule. And this was not a limited kind of an objective. It was precursor to the national reconstruction. So the agenda was very holistic. It was regional, national, and international at the same time. Their contributions were rich, varied, and covered many aspects of public life: political, legal, reformatory, social, and literary. While dethronement of the colonial rule was the primary goal, they linked this aim with the larger goal of building a new province and a nation based on political, economic, and cultural emancipation. The memory of this struggle by women needs to be remembered in today's cynical times. It has correctly been stated that those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. The legacy left behind by valiant Odia women like Sarla and Kuntala Kumari represents a rich and many-layered vision of the self and the world. It is hoped that by reclaiming this lost story of the Satyagraha, we can hope to rebuild the nation on a new imaginary. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to offer my meditation on the contribution of Odia women to the Satyagraha movement in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mohanty. It has
Very
really
nice.
been a wonderful
nice.
talk. Very informative and very inspiring. Actually, we feel honored to get to hear you today on this platform. Thank you for being with us once again. And I suggest that we take questions and answers after the second talk. Please allow me to go to the next speaker. Is it okay with you all?
Yes, please go ahead.
Wanted to add something to what he said.
No, I think we can have that later. Comments come
Do that
later.
in the end, okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're going to have Dr. Varsha Das as our second speaker, who has more than 100 publications to her credit. They include originals, translations, and adaptations. Please mute yourself, all of you. Yeah. They're in the genre of fiction, non-fiction, poetry, radio plays, and books for children. She writes in Gujarati, Hindi, and English, and translates from Bangla, English, Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, and Odia. Here we see the complete national integration in you, Mrs. Dr. Varsha Das. Her latest publications are Oriya Sahitya Darshan, a collection of various forms of Oriya literature translated into Gujarati, collection of radio plays in Hindi published in 3 volumes. Looking for Gandhi in Our Times is a compilation of her lectures on Gandhiji. She's been writing on visual arts for the past 50 years. She is the recipient of several awards. The first one was at the age of 18 for her book for children in Gujarati. She has been awarded by the organizations like Sahitya Academy New Delhi and Gujarati Sahitya Parishad Ahmedabad for the translation of Dr. Sitakanta Mahapatra's Oriya poems into Gujarati. For her contribution in humanistic education and peace, she is awarded honorary professorship by Soka University of Tokyo. She has worked with the National Book Trust for three decades in different capacities, and she is the former director of National Gandhi Museum, New Delhi, and is a life member of several educational and literary organizations. We are very, very fortunate to get to hear you, Dr. Varsha Das. Over to you, please. You're muted, ma'am.
Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah. It's fine.
So my pranams to all of you present here. Many thanks to my friend Manju Kak for reaching out to me for this wonderful opportunity. I'm grateful to All India Women's Conference and National Foundation for Communal Harmony for
Ma'am, can you increase your volume a little bit?
I don't know how to increase that, but I'll bring it closer maybe.
Yeah, you can do that.
So I'm grateful to All India Women's Conference and National Foundation for Communal Harmony for their invitation to speak on the subject, which is always so inspiring and relevant. I feel honored and privileged. Gandhiji's non-violent battle to fight against injustice began during his long stay in South Africa. Prior to that, the world had witnessed violent battles. There were two unprecedented characteristics of these satyagrahas in South Africa. One was that it was non-violent agitation, and the second, women had participated in it. Their fight was against injustice and exploitation. Elizabeth Mario Molteno, the oldest child of the Prime Minister John Molteno of Cape Colony, had worked with Gandhis. Her letters and speeches give graphic information about the women of Indian origin that struggled for justice and even went to prison. Elizabeth had spent some time with Kasturba Gandhi at the Phoenix settlement, and that is where she learnt about women protesters' plight in the prison. She wrote in her letter to General Botha, which was dated 13 January 1914, that it cuts me to the heart that in our dear native land of South Africa, Indians and Mohammedan ladies have been obliged to go to prison, and many are still in prison not because of any crime, but because they feel that they must protest against the laws that invalidate marriages which are sacred and binding in the land of their birth. A Muslim migrant's marriage was considered invalid because, as per the ruling of the Justice Malcolm of the Cape Supreme Court, all marriages that were not performed according to Christian rites were invalid. This was in March 1913. Gandhiji explained the consequences of this ruling to all married women of the Indian community, including Kasturba, and asked if they would like to protest against it. And they were ready. A number of Hindu, Muslim, and Parsi women became the first group of women satyagrahis. They crossed the threshold, came into the street, and went to prison. And that too in a foreign land. Women belonging to 3 different religions, speaking different languages, worked together to assert their rights and dignity. During Gandhiji's stay in South Africa, a new law was imposed upon the people of Indian origin. Everyone above the age of 8 had to compulsorily register themselves and also give their fingerprints. They would be deported if they broke the law. It was at this point, at Gandhiji's initiative, 2,000 Indians belonging to different religions met together in the Empire Theatre on the 11th of September 1906 and took an oath, having God as their witness, that they will passively resist the new law. The president of Transvaal British Indian Association, Abdul Ghani, presided over this meeting. Though the word satyagraha was not yet coined, but the very first resolution of non-violent resistance was passed on that day. So because Gandhiji firmly believed that there is a limit to violent action and it can fail, non-violence knows no limits and it never fails. Gandhiji exemplified this in his life and succeeded in convincing hundreds and thousands of satyagrahis who proudly participated in the struggle for India's freedom. Let me now cite some examples of Indian women. During my tenure in the National Book Trust, I was associated with one book edited by Sushila Nair and Kamala Mankekar. Its title was Women Pioneers in India's Renaissance. The struggle and pioneering work of 67 women has been recorded in this book under three main areas, namely culture and society, freedom and women's liberation, and making a new India. And each account is written by those who knew them personally or knew about their contribution. Perin Ben, Goshi Ben, and Khurshid Ben were the three illustrious granddaughters of Dadabhai Nauroji. This account is written by two eminent professors, Usha Mehta and Alu Dastur. During the salt satyagraha of 1930, Perin Ben was the first woman president of the War Council. She was arrested on the 2nd July. It was her devotion and courage which gave immense strength to the women's movement in Bombay. The news had leaked out that before her arrest, that the highest political officials met together to discuss whether these women should be arrested or not. And finally, they decided to arrest them because they found them more dangerous than men in rousing the people to fight with courage and dedication. Perin Ben was the life and soul of Rashtriya Stri Sabha and its volunteer corps, the Desh Sevika Sangh. They carried out picketing of foreign cloth shops and liquor and toddy shops in Bombay. Communal award was created, excuse me, Communal award was created by the British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald on the 16th of August, 1932. So separate electorate was now available to the Muslim, forward class, Buddhist, Sikh, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians, Europeans, and depressed classes. Gandhiji was not in favor of such divisions. He started his fast against the communal award in September 1932. Now, finding themselves unable to do any public work, these sisters formed a group called Gandhi Seva Sena. They engaged in constructive work, sale of khadi and other village industries products. Khurshid Ben, the youngest of the three, worked with Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was trying to convert the militant Pathans into messengers of peace and demonstrate nonviolence. Gandhiji nurtured many sensitive women to work for the nation. One such person was Mithuben Petit. Her work began with the salt satyagraha in 1930, and then for nearly 4 decades, she worked for the upliftment of tribal poor, the unprivileged, and the unreached of Gujarat. She knew that the secret of success in any Gandhian venture was a lifetime of unswerving and continuous devotion to duty. Each one's life in this book is extremely inspiring. I would like to speak about the contribution of Anasuya Ben Sarabhai as described by Dr. Indira Harve. Indira Harve is the economist and lives in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad. So Anasuya Ben was born in 1885 to a wealthy industrialist family in Ahmedabad. She went to England to study medicine in 1911 and then shifted to London School of Economics to study social work. In 1913, she returned to India and she started a nursery school in the colony of workers. And then she set up a credit cooperative society, Ayurvedic hospital, adult education classes, prohibition, etc. for workers' welfare. Ahmedabad was hit by plague epidemic in 1917. Some workers went away to their villages and received bonus, but those who were residents of Ahmedabad did not receive any money. They went to Anasuya Ben for help. She asked them to strike work if their demand was not accepted. It was a unique strike. Anasuya Ben was on the side of workers, and her younger brother, Ambalal, was the president of the Mill Owners Association. Gandhiji was watching this from a distance, and he wrote to Ambalal to pay the raise in wages to the local workers. In 1920, India's first trade union was formed. Gandhiji clearly explained that the union was not against mill owners, but it was to serve the workers. Gandhiji treated the Ahmedabad textile industry as a laboratory and evolved a new ideology. Though Gandhiji played an important role as the advisor and the guide, it was Anasuya Sen who ensured effective translation of Gandhian ideology into practice. Ambalal Sarabhai's daughter Mridula was a student of Gujarat Vidyapith, the university founded by Gandhiji in 1920. She took the lead in 1930 in organizing and picketing of liquor and foreign cloth shops. She was also one of the first to organize Vanar Sena of children and moved around the city singing patriotic songs. She was arrested and imprisoned. She was a hardcore non-violent activist. Historian Professor Aparna Basu has written about Mridula Sarabhai's work for communal harmony, and I would like to quote her. Ahmedabad, Meerut, Bihar, Punjab, wherever communal troubles flared up, Mridula rushed to restore peace. Near the village in Shahjahanpur, in Meerut district, she stood on a tree for 7 hours, pacifying an armed Jat mob against attacking Muslims. In Bihar, she accompanied Gandhiji as he moved from village to village on foot in scorching heat, trying to restore confidence amongst Muslims. With freedom came partition and the migration of millions of refugees from Pakistan. And once again, Mridula was in action, this time in Punjab with Amritsar as a headquarter. Apart from resettling and rehabilitating refugees, a significant work was the recovery of abducted women from both India and Pakistan. The raging fire of Hindu-Muslim riots deeply disturbed Gandhiji. Biographer Louis Fisher mentions in the chapter Pilgrim's Progress, and I quote him, "In Bombay, a Hindu gave shelter to a Muslim friend the other day. This infuriated a Hindu mob who demanded the head of the Muslim friend. The Hindu would not surrender his friend, so both went down literally in deadly embrace. During the recent bloodbath in Calcutta, stories of Muslims having, at the peril of their lives, sheltered their Hindu friends and vice versa were recorded. Mankind would die if there were no exhibition at any time and anywhere of the divine in them. Gandhi now went in search of the divine in maddened man. Widespread Muslim attacks on Hindu had taken place during October in the distant Noakhali and Tipura rural areas of Bengal. And in spite of his poor wealth, he went to Noakhali. Calcutta was also on fire. Gandhiji said, "I'm not going to leave Bengal until last embers of the trouble are stamped out. I may stay on here for a whole year. If necessary, I will die here." He was accompanied by Bibi Amatus Salam, herself a Muslim. She had gone to Noakhali in 1946 to encourage the Hindus to return to their homes who had run away from their villages due to communal violence. She even fasted for 25 days to get back the weapons from violent goons, which they had snatched from the people of another community, and she succeeded. Gandhiji offered her a glass of juice and she broke her fast. Gandhiji had written in the Harijan dated 15th September 1940, "The lawlessness of communalism is a monster with many faces. It hurts all in the end, including those who are primarily responsible for it." On the 4th of January 1948, that is just 26 days before he was assassinated, he had written in the same journal, "The key to the solution of the communal tangle lies in everyone following the best in his own religion and entertaining equal regard for the other religions and their followers. Gandhiji had demonstrated this during his stay in South Africa. While doing their daily prayers at the Phoenix settlement, they used to sing Vaishnava Janato Tene Kahiye Je Peed Parai Jane Re, Par Dukhe Upakar Kare Toye Mana Abhiman Na Aane Re. So this was written by Narsi Mehta in the 15th century. And it means that the person who understands the pain of others is known as Vaishnava. He helps others who are suffering but never boasts about it. The word Vaishnava literally means a devotee of Lord Vishnu. The root verb in Sanskrit is vish, which means expand, encompass. In each line of this poem, Narsimha defines a true Vaishnava. These are basically the qualities of a good human being. A number of outsiders used to visit Gandhiji at the Phoenix settlement. One of them was Joseph Royappan. He was a Christian and was good at music. He loved singing Vaishnava Jana song. As written by Gandhiji in his letter to Naran Das, dated 30 September 1930, Gandhiji writes that once, instead of Vaishnava Jana, he sang Krishna Jana. All joined him instantly, and I could see Joseph's joy knew no bound. A good human being can be of any religion from any part of the world. In the same letter, Gandhiji also mentioned that late Daud Seth's son, late Hussain, often stayed at the ashram. He used to join the prayers quite enthusiastically. In a very sweet, melodious voice, accompanied by an organ, he used to sing, Ye Bahare Baag Duniya Chand Roz. This spring in the garden of world is but for a few days. We all learned to sing that devotional song, and it was often included in the prayers. It has been recorded by the historians that just as Joseph Royappan had replaced Vaishnava Jana with Krishna Jana, Imam Sahib had replaced it with Muslim Jana. Gandhiji raised a pertinent question in his letter to Naran Das, dated 23rd September 1930. Why do we need so many religions? We know that there are many religions, there is only one soul, but there are innumerable human bodies. Masses of human bodies cannot be avoided even if you want to. Just like in the tree, there is only one root of religion, but its leaves are innumerable. So, before I conclude, I would like to point out that the latest example of continuing legacy of women's satyagrahis is at the Singhu border. Women in their 20s to 80s are fighting their non-violent battle with amazing dedication and determination, even after losing their dear ones within this 1 year time. On the front page of the Indian Express of 20th November 2021, there was a news item about women and men who spent a year at Singhu border. A 32-year-old accountant, Sukhmani, is from Morinda in Mohali. She is one of the youngest people volunteering at the main stage from where the farm leaders address the crowd. She arrived in December last year and hasn't gone back. She saw farmers' protests on the television and asked her parents to let her join those. She couldn't see the farmers being beaten up and struggling in winter. Her father, a property dealer, said no. She told him that she would go only for a few weeks. She took a bus from Mohali, and as she entered the bus, she took an oath that she won't return unless the elderly farmers leave too. Her mother, a teacher, wants her to return home, but Sukhmani does not want to go. She speaks to them on the phone and ends up crying when they ask her to return. This is perhaps for the first time in her life she has defied them. She does say that it is not easy, but she is determined to support the protest. So long live such Sukhmanis and long live such women Satyagrahis. Thank you very much.
I can't hear you. Unmute, Supriya.
Unmute, Supriya.
Sorry. Uh, so thank you very much, Dr. Varsha Das. It was indeed a great talk by you. Very, very informative. And it was like a storytelling class for us, session for us, with of women satyagrahis. Lovely hearing you. Thank you once again. Now, I would like to open this forum for questions and answers.
Can I just say something, Supriya, before it starts?
Sure.
We are opening the question answer session, and I'm sure a lot of you have many things to ask our very, very renowned and wonderful speakers. One thing that I wanted to mention at the very beginning, and that is this title of our seminar, Women's Satyagraha and Women and a Continuing Legacy, is really inspired by our past patron, Dr. Aparna Basu, whose book, Women's Struggle, is in our library and many of you have read. And she is the one who felt that this chapter in our history of Satyagraha is an important legacy for All India Women's Conference, because unless we have women who actually brave and fight for the truth, we are doing a disservice. So let us remember her today and all the good work that she did and all the very many ways in which she inspired a lot of us to be part of this movement. So Dr. Aparna Basu, wherever you are, we are with you and we remember you, and you will continue to be part of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Manjuji, for that information. Now, I would request Maithili ji to come and say whatever she wanted to say after the first lecture. Maithili ji, are you there? Anyone else who would like to say anything till Maithili ji comes online?
Yeah, I'm Vidut Mohanty. Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Okay. I wanted to ask Sachi Babu if the present women's movement influenced by the satyagrahis of freedom struggle, the present women's movement in Odisha. Of course, Barsha gave a counter example. It did influence Sukhmani but in the context of Odisha, I want to know if it is possible or it is so. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
I
for
hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Dr. Vidut Mohanty, for asking that question. My answer will be twofold. One, I do not have sufficient awareness, knowledge about the women's movement in Orissa in all its dimensions. That is one. The second thing is that I think we have to redefine Gandhi's role in the Satyagraha movement so as to make it applicable in our own context itself. Because history, as Heraclitus said, that you cannot cross the same river twice. I think it is important to also redefine Gandhi's role and in the present context of globalization. I think the times have changed and we have to have a new approach. The kernel of truth that Gandhiji spoke about non-violence and peace and secularism of a non-dogmatic kind, because I believe that secularism and spirituality also go together. It was exemplified in the life of Gandhiji. So I think a similar approach, which is more comprehensive, which is more nuanced, for example, which does not really create polarization in thought and thought values, needs to be really harnessed in our own kind of a context of women's movement. I think, and I would say that women's movement is not completely distinct from the larger movement for emancipation. If you look at South Africa, for example, if you look at the American experience, and I'm reminded of a pioneering book that I had read, it really opened my eyes. It is a book by Mary Kelly called Private Women, Public Stage, Literary Domesticity in America. And secondly, when I was teaching British literature, and I realized 30 years, 25 years down the line, how much of prejudice, for example, we have inherited. Because how often, for example, Supriya ji and others, we really teach and learn about Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin, for example. And they are mentioned in passé. And similarly, Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin, their child, Mary Shelley. And Mary Shelley was married to Percy Bysshe Shelley. And we teach about William Wordsworth and others, for example, and Coleridge. But how rarely we talk about Dorothy Wordsworth. Only in Tinton Abbey, for example, in passing. Tinton Abbey, in passing, 5 years have passed. The immortal poem of Wordsworth about the attempt to capture the past. And Dorothy Wordsworth, the sister, he says, "My dear sister." So biographical detail just in passing. But, you know, when I was interested, so my work in Sarvodaya movement is absolutely not disconnected from my work in British Romanticism. So this is that is exactly the kind of a thing that I'm trying to see, that we have to recapture and recuperate larger narratives, both in the context of British literature, American literature, South African experience, regional writing, international and cosmopolitan vision. And I was absolutely dumbstruck when I read Grasmere's journal. How many British English professors know and teach Grasmere's journal of Dorothy Wordsworth? They usually, in a customary manner, they mention. And I'm digressing slightly from the kind of a question that Vidut Mohanty had, but I'm sure that she was eliciting this kind of an answer from me. That if you are talking about the influence and impact of one writer, you have to have a larger approach to understanding, and larger humanistic and cosmopolitan and national vision and visionary and imaginary also. So I think I am making a case for a basic institutional kind of a changes and changes in the syllabi. And when we are talking about freedom struggle, it is not just a matter of introducing some NCERT books. It is a question of a larger revisionistic kind of a history that needs to be really thought of. So yes, Vidut Mohanty, I would say that certain amount of influence is definitely there with regard to peaceful approach to the resolution of the problem. And picketing is certainly going on in the context of Orissa. And I can tell you that I have been reading the news also regularly, and I can tell you that the people who are at the forefront, the state is supporting, drinking. Everywhere the state is supporting drinking. The victims of drinking are the women and the children. In Orissa, I can tell you in an authentic manner, and I'm sure it's the same story which is there in Bihar also. The people who supported prohibition, for example, are the women. The people who go and, sort of remove those shops, for example, that exactly the women are there. So definitely there is an influence of Gandhi with regard to prohibition. So, I mean, one might say that, there should not be total prohibition. There should be moderate drinking, for example. Maybe we'll differ from that. But I do not think, I mean, I can certainly, state it in a categorical business manner that the state should not be promoting drinking. Nowhere should the state be promoting, because it is absolutely uncontrolled drinking. And then also the hard-earned money in the household is spent in drinking. And the people who bear the brunt are the women and the children. So Gandhian approach, for example, to liquor and picketing, for example, is still going on in the context of Orissa. And women are in the forefront. And I'm sure that they are influenced directly by the example and influence of Gandhiji.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohanty. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. If there are any more questions, can I ask the audience? If not, we are actually heading to our closing time, and I would invite Mrs. Veena Kohli for delivering the vote of thanks, formal vote of thanks. Veena ji is our past president and now
I have
our
a suggestion.
patron.
I have a suggestion to make, because
Uh-huh.
we are in the presence of, I have one small suggestion to make to the authorities of the All India Women's Conference. You know,
Okay.
in the course of my presentation, I did mention that Kuntala Kumari had actively participated and given lectures to the All India Women's Conference. And this is narrated, it is chronicled in the very famous book called Kuntala Kumari Jibanacharita. Till now, the most authentic account by Chakradhara Mahapatra. I think there was an attempt during the time of the centenary of Kuntala Kumari, who spent the last years of her life in Delhi. I think there was an effort made by Dr. J.P. Das and Manoranjan Mohanty and others, but I think they failed to find the site, to the best of my knowledge. But I would make an appeal to the authorities of the Women's Conference here, All India Women's Conference, that please do commemorate the contribution of Kuntala Kumari and Sarala Devi and Malati Chaudhary and Annapurna Maharana. Whenever you think of a Hall of Fame, I would like to make a request in a non-chauvinistic manner that the contribution of Rama Devi, Malati Chaudhary, Annapurna Maharana, Sarala Devi, and Kuntala Kumari, at least their portrait should be there in your own Hall of Fame. Thank you.
Yes, sure, Professor Mohanty. It will be
We have
considered
taken
by
a
our
note of
president.
it.
Now, now I continue with the delivery of vote of thanks by Mrs. Veena ji. She is past president and now our patron. Before becoming the president, various portfolios, Roshni, the AIWC periodical, as member in charge, and also worked as the treasurer. She keeps interest in art. Veena ji, over to you, please.
Thank you, Supriya ji. It is indeed.
You are muted. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Can you hear
We
me?
can hear you.
It is a pleasure for me to thank everyone at the end of this meeting, which
Yes.
has been so flawless and a complete success. So at the outset, I would like to express our gratitude to the National Foundation of Communal Harmony and Mr. Manoj Pant for supporting these programs since the last many years. Our collaboration with them has been very fruitful, and the impact of these programs has been both direct as well as indirect, and has created a culture of peace among the people who have benefited and among all the people who have been participating in these programs. For example, our branches and members of our branches, and indirectly these programs, how they have affected their own members. I would also like to thank Professor Mohanty for giving us such a detailed account of the women's participation in the freedom movement in Orissa, and of course, how these women helped the freedom movement to carry on with the Gandhian thought and the women in Satyagraha. In fact, these details are so unknown to us, And it would really be a very good idea to record all this in some form of a book, which could be an apt tribute to Dr. Panna Basu's book, The Women in Satyagraha. It could really be, I would even go to the extent of saying it could be a sequel to her book. Although she also has included some women from Orissa, but the detailed account which Professor Monti has given us has been relatively unknown to us. Here again, I bring in the value of peace and the Gandhian thought. Gandhiji himself said that it was his wife, really, Kasturba, who taught him the first lesson of ahimsa by showing her grievances and anger against him by being non-cooperative and not speaking to him for days till he agreed to her wishes. Now, this is a movement which Gandhiji started during a time when the whole world was at turmoil. And it worked for India. It worked for us. It gave us our independence, which is something to be noted, that we got our independence mainly through working on Gandhi's principle of non-violence, and we had a peaceful agitation of all kinds. So thank you, Dr. Professor Monti, for your very detailed account and the inputs that you gave us. And I also want to thank Dr. Varsha Das, who gave us a very interesting presentation and traced the history of the women's protest against injustice as early as March 1930 in the city of Phoenix in South Africa. Of course, these women were all influenced by Gandhian thought. And as she said, I quote, Gandhi said, non-violence is never limitless, and non-violence always succeeds, whereas violence has a limit. And this is what I want to thank Varsha ji, who has always been a friend of AIWC, to have given us this very inspiring presentation and given us an insight of the work that was done by the women who were influenced again by Gandhiji. And I also like to quote what she said, that communalism is a monster. She said, Gandhi said, and what is important is what makes a good human being. That is the most important thing. So she went on to tell us about the ills of communalism and how Gandhiji protested against it. I simply want to add one little point, which I feel, if I have the time, if you allow me, I would like to just simply add that I would like to take the example from nature, where all plants, forests, mountains, oceans, rivers, animals exist side by side and are part of this universe. Similarly, we think we are separate from other people, but it is not so. We are all part of an environment, and we and the universe are inseparable. So, if we put the principle of the oneness, then living and respecting each individual for what they are and not their differences will create peace and harmony in our daily lives. It is my suggestion that this concept becomes a part of our education, and it is treated as an additional subject in the curriculum of schools and colleges. This will give our students a practical knowledge of the benefits they can derive from a life of peace and not a life of dispute and discontent. This could create a entirely new way of thinking and living. This is my suggestion to our educationists, especially Professor Mohanty. I won't take more time, and I will just close now by saying that lastly, which is not the least, I want to thank the President of AIWC and her team for facilitating these programs, and Dr. Manju Kak, MIC, for her efforts and research in organizing these programs with NFCH and our branches. And I also take this opportunity to thank Amrita Saraswat, our MIC grants, who has been applying and following up with NFSCH for all the necessary formalities required to release the grant for these programs. And of course, I cannot but thank very much our Joint Secretary Supriya Bharara, who conducts these programs so well, so flawlessly, and very nice. Thank you very much, all of you, for participating. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Supriya?
Thank you, Veena ji. Thank you, Veena ji, for your vote of thanks. Sheila ji,
Yes.
are we closing the program? Would you have any
Anybody
closing
has to say
remarks?
anything? Yeah. Thank you very much. It was lovely listening to both of you, Professor Mohanty and Varsha ji. It was really wonderful listening, and I'm definitely sure our members also must have enjoyed your talks. Thank you very much. And we will
Kuljit
keep
ji,
your suggestion in mind, Professor Mohanty.
Thank you.
Yes, Supriya,
Kuljit ji, do you have to say?
Yes, we really enjoyed the program. Very informative. Professor Mohanty also was very impressive. And I'm glad that Madam Varsha, she connected the Satyagraha of 19th century with the present by giving the example of Sukhmani Kaur. And I would like to add to that that yesterday in the paper, there were other names also of women, illiterate women, those who have come forward and they are participating in this Satyagraha. Thank you so much, Varsha ji, for giving us the detailed information about Satyagraha, and Dr. Mohanty. He was so emotional when he was talking about women, and I could identify myself with him. So thank you so much for giving such a lovely lecture and information, and we really appreciate and welcome your emotions also, that the women must come in the history. Their name shouldn't be deleted.
So finally, thank you, Professor Mohanty.
Kuljit, you have
Kuljit ji, we can't hear you.
No, I was saying about Manju, how she puts all her efforts, all her life in making the program such a success. So my congratulations to Manju also. Thank you so much, Supriya and Sheila ji, for this program, for organizing this program. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
So we thank once again Professor Mohanty and Dr. Varsha Das, and we remain in touch with you as AIWC.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Manju, for inviting me.